Dr. Knox a couple of times mentioned ECTRIMS meeting. So ECTRIMS is a meeting involving treatment and research in multiple sclerosis. It's held once a year, and it's the world's premier MS meeting. And if there's anything new, big, that has to come out, typically it comes out in the annual American meeting or at the ECTRIMS meeting. So at the recent ECTRIM meeting, there were a few new things presented, and one of the new agents that they discussed or released the results was teriflunomide. Yet another oral agent that's again been studied for the last 10 years and finally has come to some sort of fruition. It's given once a day, and again, it affects certain mechanisms within cells, within T cells, and that's how it causes its effect. And the trial that was done with teriflunomide is called TEMSO trial, and it was reported a month ago. So in this trial, almost 1,100 patients were randomized to receive either placebo or low-dose teriflunomide or high-dose teriflunomide for 2 years. And the bottom line, about 31% reduction of relapses versus placebo. So this is reminiscent of our first-line drugs like interferons and Copaxone. So the relapse reduction is in that range. Disability progression with the low dose was not significant, but for the high dose was marginally significant. So I think this drug, I can say, is kind of like our old drugs, but it's oral and it's well tolerated. MRI activity, again, there was a significant effect on new lesions, on what are called GAD-positive lesions, and something called black holes. So these are lesions seen on MRI scan that imply actual brain tissue damage. So you don't want black holes in the brain, and it did reduce black hole accumulation by about 40%. Although it is a safe drug, only 70% completed the 2-year study. That shows to me that it's a bit of one of these nuisance drugs, might cause some nausea or some of the side effects that patients decided not to continue, or it may be because they had relapses or attacks and decided to go on to some other stronger therapy. So we don't know what the actual breakdown is for the 30% that didn't complete the trial. This drug has been around for a long time, and so far there are no safety signals, so that sounds good. The teriflunomide also has an extensive development program. I told you about the TEMSO results, but there are 3 other studies, and they're mentioned there briefly. TOWER, 1,100 patients where teriflunomide is studied versus Rebif and placebo. A study involving clinically isolated syndrome patients. In other words, can we start it at the onset of MS? And TENAIR is a head-to-head study against Rebif. And because it's a milder agent, some of us are toying with the idea, is it possible to add it on to another therapy? So a person could be on Copaxone, and you add on teriflunomide, and the safety and effectiveness therapies in that line are ongoing at the present time. Dimethyl fumarate, or BG12, is another oral agent, and it works by inhibiting inflammation in the brain, by having some sort of a neuroprotective effect within the brain, and in phase 1 and 2 studies have shown enough efficacy and safety that we're moving on with phase 3 trials. And there are 2 of them at the present time. They're called DEFINE and CONFIRM. One is against placebo. That's the DEFINE study. It's actually fully enrolled as of 2 months ago, which means in the next month or in the next year or so we'll start getting the results. And CONFIRM is 1,230 relapsing remitting patients randomized to receive this drug, Copaxone, or placebo, so to see head-to-head going against one of the existing agents if it's better or about the same. I'm sorry, there's lots of these names I'm throwing at you, but I wouldn't unless they were going to be a reality in the next 2 to 5 years, and they are. So that's how it is. It's good that we'll have choice. I think that landscape will have changed totally 5 years from now when there will be so many oral agents available. So this is called laquinimode. It's also oral drug given once a day, and again, it decreases inflammation in the brain. It has neuroprotective properties. Phase 2 trials have shown enough efficacy and safety that phase 3 trials are going ahead, and there are 2 of them. Allegro, fully enrolled right now, so a year and a half from now we'll get the results. And Bravo study, which is studying this agent against Avonex and placebo, so a 3-arm study. That'll take another 2 years to finish. In the past, we have said a few things about statins, and in the ECTRIMS this year, last month, there were enough papers on this that I thought I should have a slide on this. Cholesterol-lowering drugs, or statins, are known to be anti-inflammatory. And where inflammation is a major problem with MS, people have thought that statins might help, and in the animal model, there was some early evidence that statins may indeed help in multiple sclerosis. But a couple of early trials done a year or two ago showed that adding statin on top of an interferon may actually be even harmful. In other words, it may interfere with the interferon's efficacy. So this time, or this year at ECTRIMS, there were two studies. One, I just briefly had that on that slide, adding on atorvastatin, which is Lipitor, to Rebif, really didn't show any beneficial effect at all. And a very nice Danish study. In Denmark, patients with multiple sclerosis are automatically registered into an observational program. So in other words, they're all being studied all the time. So this is as perfect as it gets to population-based research. So 300 multiple sclerosis patients were started on interferon Avonex, and then some of them got simvastatin, which is Zocor, on top, and some of them got a placebo on top. And they were seen 3 monthly, MRI scans were done, and at the end of the year, it was found that the simvastatin add-on did not help at all. So adding on statin for the sake of MS is no good, but if you have a high cholesterol problem, feel free to go ahead. This is a reminder for me to go into now 2 drugs that are not in the next 2-year horizon, but that have the next 3 to 5-year horizon. So you all know about Tysabri. Tysabri is a drug that we've had for the past 4 or 5 years now. It's given intravenously as an infusion, and it has a very profound effect. It's a second-line agent, so for those patients that fail treatment on the first-line drugs, Tysabri is your friend. But it's still an infusion, and it has some safety issues, so we're looking for oral agents that do the same thing, but perhaps are safer and better tolerated. So a drug called firatograst is an oral Tysabri-like agent and does exactly the same thing. So it prevents the T cells from crossing the blood-brain barrier. And this phase 2 trial was done on 343 patients who were randomized 4 arms. In 3 of those arms, patients received different escalating doses of this drug, and in the final arm was the placebo. And clearly in the higher dose of this drug, there was a 50% reduction in gadolinium-enhancing lesions on MRI scan. So therefore, it does seem like there is enough signal here to proceed with a phase 3 trial, or at the very least, a longer phase 2 trial to see if this is worth taking forward. A drug called rituximab was tried in relapsing remitting MS and was resoundingly successful and was published in the New England Journal of Medicine a year or 2 ago. Then rituximab was used in primary progressive MS and unfortunately failed. A humanized version of rituximab is called ocrelizumab, and its phase 2 data was presented at ECTRIMS last month. So this was a 6-month study with 220 patients, and it was a randomized controlled trial, 4 arms, 2 of whom got ocrelizumab, 2 doses. 1 arm got Avonex, 1 arm got placebo, and the results were simply astounding. With the new lesion formation, which was the primary endpoint, there was an 89 to 96% reduction of new lesion formation compared to placebo. This is very, very encouraging. There was 1 death in that cohort of 220 patients. It happened to be in the ocrelizumab arm. It was from what they call a systemic inflammatory response, a very vague entity. So we don't know for sure whether it's related or not. Again, a safety signal that needs to be very carefully studied in the phase 3 study should that proceed.